He fell to praising Mary and spoke of her good looks, letting his eye dwell upon her features with a look so gross that Mary coloured red with wrath. I had asked too John Booth and his sister Faith, a demure young maid. She was all Mary was not. For Mary was rosy and plump with auburn curling hair which would escape wanton over her face and neck, and had a laughing eye with rosy lips and a saucy tongue. But Faith was as dark as a sloe, as to hair and eye, with a skin of delicate white and as slender as a lily stalk. My heart did warm to her from the first, and I think she too favoured me. Strange as it were that two maids so unalike should be so sweet to live with and think on. Stranger still that two men so unlike as Soldier Jack and myself should be at one about Faith's sweetness and lovableness. For as younger ones there was no lack of sport, postman's knock and forfeits and other games in which there is overmuch kissing. I chose Faith rather than Mary, and the Faith was the greater stranger in our house, and I was ever taught to be civil to our guests. But I was no little nettled by the carryings on of Mary and George. But when George could spare a thought for anyone but Mary and chose Faith, the colour would crimson Faith's cheeks and brow, and then all her flush would fade away and leave her pale and trembling. After that, my mother had occasion to have something collected from the village and whispered this privately to Mary. Mary slipped quietly out by a side door. But Ben Walker, who was listening, stealed slyly out after her, making some excuse. About 40 minutes after, I heard the door slam, and Mary came into the room, panting hard for breath and with her bodice ripped apart and her neckerchief undone.
What's happened, Mary? Where's Ben Walker?
Aye, where is he? Oh, the coward! The coward! Oh, here he comes.
Now, Ben Walker, give account of this then.
It's not my doing, George. I've laid no hand on her. Have I, Mary?
Oh, you coward, Ben Walker, you pitiful coward.
It was this way. About halfway back, a fella looked over the wall. He were a big un, I tell you. As big as a steeple. And there were more behind. I heard him hanging on. He got hold of Mary, and I heard him say he was going to have a kiss. Mary started to scream and struggle, and he gave me such a look, so I made off over what fields.
A soldier, were it? What macker man was he?
Bigger than thee, with a black beard, and a scar across his face.
It was one of them soldiers staying at Red Lion in Marsden. He'd been drinking tonight, and he used me rough. I got one of his fingers between my teeth, and I bit him, and he had to throw me off. He called me a vicious little devil, and I ran for it. But look at you, Ben Walker, hanging your head with a hangdog look. Shame on you.
At this, Ben Walker mumbled some excuses and sloped off. No one stayed after that. Thus my birthday party was dashed. I lay awake that night thinking. The next morning I was up betimes. I dressed in my Sunday best and I headed for Marsden. Jack joined me on the road.
You must keep your head, Ben. Watch his eye. Face him square and watch his eyes a big un. He'll likely come at you like a mad bull. Keep out of his way when he rushes. Let him tire him, son. The way these soldiers have been living lately, he'll have no water, no wind in him. Then when he shows signs of signals of distress, hug him. Break his ribs, squeeze the guts out on him. Glory, hallelujah, he'll gasp like a god.
At the Red Lion we found John Race, the little red-faced landlord, in no good humour.
I'll be a ruined man if this goes on, Ben. House full of soldiers and paying for their drink is the last thing on their mind. Sometimes he laughs and sometimes he just swears. That's terrible.
He led me down to the kitchen. There were several soldiers lounging and lolling about, some smoking, some drinking or at cards. It wasn't difficult to spot my man. He was stood with his legs outstretched by the fire. I strode straight to him and smote him across the face with the back of my hand.
Fight!
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 Into the army!
Into the
lads, we're bully boys!
There we faced each other. Long Tom and I. He was as big a man as I, with more flesh and more skill. But loose living had told on me, and he soon began to blow. He hammered at me lustily, and I took it smiling. My chance came at last. I put all my weight and force into one blow full on his mouth. He went down like a felled ox and rolled on the ground, kicking his heels and spitting out blood and teeth. On our homeward journey, we had much scheming how to account for my face, which began to puff and show diverse colours. So we kept out all day and pretended to come home drunk later, to my mother and father's great shame. I wanted not that Mary's name should be mixed up in it. But one night, as I sat by the fire, she put a pair of warm arms around my neck. What is the magic of a woman's kiss? Now unsought she pressed a kiss upon my brow, and lo, love, glorious love, full grown and lusty, leapt into the ocean of my being and ruled it thenceforth and for evermore. I would have sprung to my feet and held up my arms, but she sprang away from me and bade me keep my distance. I was sick with doubts and sadness then, and returned to my thoughts that it was an understood arrangement between Mary and George Mellor. But for that belief, many things that happened might not have befallen. It mustn't be supposed, because I have turned aside to tell you of my own affairs, that the Luddites were idle at this time. Trade was as bad could be. And yet manufacturers persisted putting in machines that put folk out of work. And it gave not only the croppers, but all working people for miles around a feeling of oppression, injustice, and a rankling sense of wrong. When people met to set forth their grievances, they were persecuted for sedition. When they didn't meet and were quiet and law-abiding, our betters said we had no grievances. The Luddites soon realised that we existed for bigger things than to break shears and cropping frames. John Booth often discussed this with me.
We must arouse the conscience of our rulers. They cannot or will not see how desperate is our plight. Besides, 9/10 of them have a personal interest in prolonging the war. Their sense of right will not move them, so we must frighten them.
Not that I did much machine breaking myself. Besides, George Mellor was really the heart and soul of it all. He was like a man possessed. Night after night he was swearing men in, arranging midnight visits. He never wavered from his purpose, and we all trusted and loved him. Save only one. I say I didn't handle an Enoch much myself. The big sledgehammer that we battered the frames with was named Enoch after Mr. Taylor of Marsden. But after milking time one night in April, I told Mother I would be late and not to wait up for me, and set off with a poor heart for the job as if I was going to be hanged. I soon met up with Soldier Jack. As we passed through Mills Bridge, we were challenged by soldiers, but they had no grounds to stop us. We met up with George Mellor, Ben-OBills-Ep-2, and about 6 others and walked on to Paddock. There is a mill there run by a mill owner who was a foremost man of the ward and watch. I'd heard him boasting in a high-pitched squeak in the Cherry Tree Ale House about what he would do if he ever caught a Luddite. So I sniggered a bit to myself as we came up past his house to the gate leading into his mill. A light sprang on in a window over our heads, and a high-pitched voice, all tremulous, called out,
"What you mean, you gentlemen? The ward are on their rounds. My missus is shouting for them from our front window. Go on your way quietly, good masters. I'll never tell."
Open the door, stop that woman's mouth and come down and let us in, or it'll be the worse for you.
A few minutes later the door opened, and there in the kitchen stood little Mr. S, I won't tell you his name, in his shirt, with his shanks all bare and his knees knocking audibly. Behind him I could see a vinegar-faced woman in a nightdress and frilled cap.
It's no use shouting. The soldiers are all over by Crossland Moor. You'll only catch a cold. Now, you have some finishing frames in the shed there.
Yes, but only little ones. Maybe 3 or 4 only.
And how many men have you sacked lately?
Well, perhaps 6 or maybe a score.
And how are they supposed to live now?
I don't know. Oh, dear me. Don't harm the frames. They cost me £200 or £300 apiece, and I owe the bank for 'em yet.
Look here. I found his pistol. Here, number 1.
And I'll have the key to the mill door too, please. Now swear to me you will never replace those machines, and swear too you'll re-employ those men.
I'll swear anything as long as you and all your men just get off my property.
Then we were off over the fields into Gledholt Wood, where we took off our masks and went our different ways to the Nag's Head. Would you believe it? The very next market day, I heard Mr. S boasting to a group of listeners how he had jumped out of bed, seized his pistol, and laid low a whole gang of 40 or 50 Luddites before they had fled carrying off their wounded, but only after they had destroyed his machines. But he did keep his promise about not replacing the machines. I was walking back with Ben Walker, who took my arm in that fawning way of his that made my flesh creep.
How's Mary? Sweet Sonsy Mary. You can't tell how my heart warms to Mary. And to you, Ben, for Mary's sake.
Much obliged to you, but you have a queer way of showing your liking, leaving her when Long Tom was so unmannerly.
It isn't like you to bear malice or cast things up, Ben. Let bygones be bygones, Ben. I know I'm not a warrior. Fighting's not my vocation.
Let's say no more about it. It's lucky for Mary she's got someone else to stick up for her that won't turn tail and leave her to do her own fighting. Let's talk about something else. It's no business of thine.
But it is a concern of mine, Ben. It touches me quick, does aught that touches Mary. How would you like me for a cousin-in-law?
Oh, what? Thee wed Mary? Why, she wouldn't look the side of the road you walked on. Besides, she's not for thee. She's bespoke nearer home.
What? George Mellor, do you mean?
Aye, George Mellor.
Nay, Ben. Do not be angered with me. It's no shame to anyone to lose one's heart to such a lass as Mary. I know I'm not fit for her. Where wilt to find a man that is? I'm better nor yon fine young spark we call the General. Why, man, his head is full of nonsense. All about the rights of man and striking down the oppressors of the poor. George is the biggest fool of the lot.
Well, if that's what thou thinks, then go tell him this then. And if you've out more to say about our Mary, go say it to her sen. You'll get your answer straight.
It's easy for you to talk, Ben Bamforth. Thou cares nowt about her. Come to think on it, you had eyes for nobody but Faith Booth, t'other night. A porky, ailing